Hello everyone, thank you for coming. It's going to be a short overview of what we're looking at today. I'll kind of go over the school-to-prison pipeline, which is the analytical framework I use for my research. The main research question that I went into my project with, the theory surrounding policing in schools and the school-to-prison pipeline, a bit of history in policy as well, what the data looks like in Texas at the moment, and then some alternatives like restorative justice and comparative outcomes with schools that implement policies like that, and then talk a little bit about relevant policy today. So the school-to-prison pipeline is a well-documented series of events in which students are acclimated to punitive environments targeted by police and ultimately involved in the justice system into young adulthood. Students of existing marginalized backgrounds, such as those with disabilities or from low socioeconomic status, students of color, or those in the LGBTQ+ community, are more likely to become targeted by the school-to-prison pipeline. In addition, with public school funding currently at historic lows, educators are overwhelmed by large classroom sizes, poor educational outcomes, and mounting pressures of standardized assessments. Therefore, they sometimes feel obligated to relegate disciplinary duties to third-party staff outside of the classroom, including school resource officers, which are police officers in schools. Having no standardized requirements for experience or education that teachers do for connecting with students in meaningful ways, SROs become more likely to refer students to legal measures for non-criminal offenses. My research focuses on the role of policing and critically examining what they do in schools, why they're there, and who's impacted most prominently. My research question was, what are the effects of school resource officers in public schools in the state of Texas? I break this question down into two sub-questions. How might school resource officers affect a school's frequency of using exclusionary discipline actions? And how might school resource officers affect a school's frequency of using legalistic disciplinary actions? I used a quantitative content analysis to draw conclusions and discipline trends in districts throughout the state, and then used a qualitative analysis to compare these disciplinary procedures with that of school districts in other states without commissioned police officers. For policing in schools, a dramatic increase in police presence throughout schools was seen after the 1999 Columbine high school shooting. This, as we all know, sparked a statistical trend towards violence in schools throughout the country, particularly with firearms, which are now a leading cause of death among adolescents. Although research has shown, like many of us had seen during the recent Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, that police actually do not tend to either prevent or help during school shootings or other emergency lockdowns. School boards, local and state governments, and of course police departments claim that police in schools keep students safe. Countless sources have proven time and again that police do not keep communities, neighborhoods, or already marginalized populations safe, with police violence disproportionately affecting them, and we see the same patterns within schools. For over a decade now, policing has been a controversial topic, with many increasingly aware of the damage that they cause to Black and brown communities, the improper procedures used for mental health concerns, the move away from treatment and towards incarceration for those with mental illnesses or disabilities, and rampant corruption throughout both rural and metropolitan police departments, among other concerns. However, when considering the role of police within schools, there's comparatively less conversation on their efficacy, intentions, and biases. Looking at the pipeline itself, this is a visual that I have created representing my understanding of the pipeline from the research I have seen, sort of in a ranking at first with some of the least impactful overall to most towards the end. ISS and OSS would be in-school and out-of-school suspension, as well as DAEPs, which are exclusionary programs. They stand for disciplinary alternative education programs, and ultimately expulsion, which is the most form of exclusionary discipline. School resource officers continue towards this trend, which have been shown to use excessive force, racial bias, and make environments in schools more carceral. For legalistic discipline, there are school-based arrests, ticketing, and juvenile justice alternative education programs in which students complete their education on probation. This tends to lead to dropouts, maladjustment with students' peers, and possibly cumulative court fees, leading to debt, which is more commonplace in some other states. Those involved in the juvenile justice system become far more likely to be incarcerated as adults, leading to, as more of us know, limited employment, the inability to vote, and a lot of financial instability. School-to-prison pipeline theorists have proposed several paradigms for looking at discipline policies and policing. My research follows literature that suggests that exclusionary discipline is oftentimes one of the first steps within the pipeline. Let's see. There's my research. As we can see, broken windows policing can easily be compared to zero tolerance policies, as both focus on over-penalizing minor infractions to create a culture of fear around committing crimes. In policing, this is usually called a deterrent strategy. The main differences between broken windows policing and zero tolerance policies are the populations they're applied to. Now, where did zero tolerance come from? Let's go to a little bit of history, starting with the Reagan era, of course. Tough on crime initiatives beginning in the Reagan era created the groundwork for future administrations to expand on these precedents, so that by the 90s, laws were put into place to incentivize more police in schools and more broken windows policing. According to the Department of Justice, the following acts implemented by the Clinton administration inspired the creation of a federally funded school resource officer program: the Violent Crime Control Act of 1994, the Gun-Free Schools Act of 1994, which led to the formation of a new office in the Department of Justice known as the COPS program in 1994. COPS stands for Community-Oriented Policing Services, which strengthened school police partnerships and encouraged public schools to hire more police officers. The DOJ has said that this office grew out of response to juvenile and gang violence, but can also be associated with school shootings specifically, as funding and legislation for school police tends to increase following active shooter incidents. A Justice Policy Institute report in 2011 found that a 38% increase was found in the number of SROs between 1997 and 2007 as a result of the growing implementation of zero tolerance policies. Illustrating point 4, yes, we can see a clear increase in spending on district police departments. It is on average much higher than in previous decades, as this one chart shows a sharp increase immediately after the Parkland High School shooting in 2018. Now I move on to examine the effects of policing in Texas schools today. For this project, I sampled 3 large districts, that being with 100 or more school resource officers, and 3 small districts, that being with 50 or less SROs, to see if discipline trends look different in schools with police. I specifically wanted to see if discipline gets more exclusionary or legalistic the more police are present in a school. I measured exclusionary discipline by placements in disciplinary alternative education programs, which have been described as halfway houses between school and jail. I measured legalistic discipline through placements in juvenile justice alternative education programs, where again students continue their education while on probation. These are both programs that are pretty unique to the state of Texas and have been called into question by both advocates and researchers alike, as many of the students who enter these programs never end up graduating. They've been said to create an environment that is not conducive to learning. I chose these 2 programs to focus on since they would be easier to generalize and draw statistical conclusions from, more than extreme instances like on-campus arrests or ticketing, as is commonplace in some states. The districts with 100 or more school resource officers I chose to analyze are Northside ISD in San Antonio with a 100-person police department, Cypress Fairbanks ISD near Sugar Land with a police department that includes 111 police officers and 36 support personnel, Houston ISD with a whopping 207 police officers. The smaller districts I looked at were Lamar Consolidated ISD in Fort Bend County just outside of Houston, which has 33 police officers, New Caney ISD in Montgomery County near the Woodlands, Texas, that has 25 SROs, and Laredo ISD with just 7 police officers. In the 2023 to 2024 school year, the average between the large districts, about 13% of overall discipline included DAEPs, and just over 1% included JJAEPs. For smaller districts, an average of 18% of all disciplinary actions included DAEPs, and again around 1% were removals to juvenile justice AEPs. This is seemingly a good thing that districts with more police are using less exclusionary programs for their students and referring to JJAEPs at almost the same rate. However, When looking to analyze the demographic breakdown of these discipline rates, I ran into several issues. First and foremost, the Texas Education Agency does not make their website widely accessible or easy to understand. The demographics of each district are found at a completely separate page from that of the discipline data, making it hard to compare discipline rates between race, class, and disability as listed on the website. Further, their reporting on the student populations receiving certain discipline doesn't seem to line up. I saw demographics that were ambiguous and difficult to define. It seems clear that the reporting by these districts is either incorrect or formatted rather incomprehensibly, so that, for instance, a parent of a student in Cypress or ISD with little statistical literacy would be virtually unable to compare their students' experiences with others in their demographic categories. Another major issue that makes it difficult to conduct research on school policing is the fact that there is no comprehensive registry for school resource officers. For schools that contract with local police departments, those departments also do not share how many police officers can be found in these schools, and for districts with their own departments, not every department has its own website, making it a convoluted process when looking into SROs. It took me about 3 hours just to find the totals for SROs employed by these 6 school districts, and at times I had to manually count each officer in the district-wide or school-wide staff directory. Now let's look at some, here's a map for the districts that I was looking into, just for reference. Shouldn't have that one, I'm sorry. This is kind of what I did and didn't find in the research. Further research should be done with the Texas Education Agency to make their information more widely available and accessible. Now, moving on to an alternative to the punitive discipline that we see today. Restorative justice is an alternative to punitive measures like exclusion and incarceration. The restorative justice exchange defines the practice as a response to wrongdoing that prioritizes repairing harm and recognizing that maintaining positive relationships with others is a core human need. It seeks to address the root causes of crime even at the point of transforming unjust systems and structures. This is a justice model that has been encouraged and advocated for by countless organizations, including Police Free Schools, which has created its own assault map on its website with a map of the U.S. showcasing instances of police overreach or assault on students within schools. They advocate for restorative justice as a move away from police and the inherent harm that they cause. More locally, I also found a lot of information on the school-to-prison pipeline, specifically within Texas, from Texas Appleseed, which has advocated for education justice since the 90s, and shed light on human rights violations towards minors in the juvenile justice system. The Excellence Project also advocates for progressive reforms to school discipline and education justice, seeking to rectify the criminalization of Black and brown students specifically. Now for a look at the effects of advocacy like this in alternative approaches to discipline. We can see the effects of restorative practices through a few schools in other states. Following the George Floyd protests in 2020, several districts in blue states made short-lived commitments to defund or severely restrict their police departments. But by 2025, I found that only 2 stuck with this promise. I'm going to quickly compare youth incarceration outcomes in Milwaukee, Seattle, and Oakland to that of Texas within the context of differing approaches to policing. Milwaukee, as of this March, had reinstated police officers in 11 of their schools following new legislative mandates, but including data from when they were using restorative justice, Wisconsin, as well as Washington and California, all had less youth incarceration per capita than Texas in recent years, according to the Sentencing Project. The disciplinary environments in these schools differ dramatically from the procedures in Texas. Milwaukee Public Schools previously used positive behavioral interventions and supports as a framework for their discipline with initiatives like mindfulness, one-on-one conversations, and parent contact. In Oakland, schools use restorative circles wherein students are taught to voice concerns with professional facilitators of harm repair circles. The district reports that their restorative justice model has succeeded in reducing dropout rates and chronic absence, improving graduation rates and school climate, and resolving peer-to-peer issues. However, it was reported that despite Oakland having disbanded its own police department in 2020, thanks to the Black Organizing Project, in the spring semester of 2023, just 8 out of the 18 middle and high schools in the district made a cumulative 225 calls to local law enforcement. Administrators keep their police-free goal in mind, but say they are unable to meet the goal consistently. As for Seattle Public Schools, though their state has the smallest number of detained and committed youth per capita out of these 3, their discipline policies appear similar to that of Texas, except that they're enacted exclusively by trained school staff rather than police, which may be making a significant difference in outcomes. Further research can be conducted to examine different outcomes for students receiving discipline exclusively from teachers and staff versus from police. A little bit on policy. The bill that inspired me to research this topic was House Bill 3, effective September 1st, 2023. It added a new Texas education code requiring each school board to determine the appropriate number of armed security officers for each district and, absence a good cause exception, ensure at least one armed security officer, specifically a commissioned peace officer, is present during regular school hours at each campus. Compliance with this bill varies drastically from district to district. We can see this displayed in the January 2025 Senate Education Committee interim report, which checked in on the status of public schools post House Bill 3. Only 45% of districts were found to be in compliance with the armed security requirement, the majority of them citing a lack of funding. On the other hand, one of the districts I analyzed, Lamar Consolidated ISD, reported to the Houston Chronicle that they had spent $1.7 million just before the 2023 to 2024 school year to add 18 new police officers to their existing department. So this looks very different from district to district. For an alternative policy, the Counseling Not Criminalization in Schools Act was introduced to the Texas Senate in 2023 and aims to prohibit, quote, the use of federal funds for law enforcement officers in schools. It also establishes a grant program to replace law enforcement officers with personnel and services that support mental health and trauma-informed services, as well as aiming to disband the COPS, Community-Oriented Policing Services program. This is one of very few acts of its kind to be introduced in the Texas legislature, and unfortunately died in the Senate when referred to the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Acts like this generally are quite unpopular in Texas, as most lawmakers, along with school administrators and board members, have a positive view of police in schools, despite research. More advocacy and education, including transparency from school districts, are all necessary to combat this issue and end the school-to-prison pipeline. Thank you.
That was wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and invite Professor Aguilera up to present you with your forward and stole. I want to make sure we get to celebrate this moment. As I said before, this is not only for Sully's work on this project, but for everything they've contributed as an honors student in the honors classroom and beyond. Sully, I hope you'll wear this with pride at graduation. We're so happy to have had you in this program. And Dr. Aguilera, thank you so much for working with Sully. We will have a few quick minutes for you to say something, and I think we'll have to skip Q&A because you had so much information. It was fascinating, but I hope anyone who wants to know more will find Sully, and I hope they are open and quick to taking questions later. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I just want to say thank you for choosing me, Sully, to be your advisor. Sully is brilliant and motivated and found data that I was looking for about the outcome of HB3, so that was amazing. So I just want to say